Thunder are definitely our team, though. And can we just start with most important? Because I mean, I did not put Shai Gilgeous-Alexander because similar to some of the other previews we've done, it's not that I think he's a finished product, but I expect him to have a very similar season, get 5-10% better maybe. But we know what Shai is. So that's built into what we already think. That's baked into the pie. Chet Holmgren is my most important player.
So I have him in our next category, but
Okay.
I don't think this is an unreasonable pick. I think this is a good pick. I think this is someone that is obviously going to get to really get his NBA career going this year. Missed all of last season. Was on the select team. I think it's someone that has a ton of upside that I think we're pretty high. And I think general basketball people are very, very high. And I think he has the potential, in a world where they also have Josh Giddey and both Jalen Williams, but wing Jalen Williams in particular. Mm-hmm. Chet has the potential to be the second best guy on this team behind Shai and gives them something they don't have. I mean, this is a team that has really kind of thumbed their nose at centers and wanting to play big men. And Chet isn't exactly your traditional, they didn't go and get, he's not Jakob Poeltl, but younger and sexier. God. But this is someone who's going to play the five and yeah. Yeah, they did They didn't get Bismack Biyombo to eat center minutes, which I don't think that's an unreasonable thing for teams to do. But this is someone that could fill these minutes in a really unique way, and absolutely, if it clicks away for him, the ceiling of this team gets a lot higher.
But you know what's an interesting comp though? While we're on that topic, is the Pelicans and Grizzlies both did go get Jakob Poeltl effectively, right? Those teams had a lot of perimeter talent, and they said we need a little bit of traditionality at the big man spot, and they got Steven Adams and Jonas Valanciunas, and then they traded them for each other. So now they've both had both of those guys, right? So I think it is noteworthy to look at how the Thunder are building and what Chet represents. Normally I start with these on the individual profile and the stats that jump out and why they're ready for a leap or doing something that is unique or why they're going to matter. I think in this case it actually does make the most sense to start from the team side, because here's kind of what the Thunder were working with last year. They allowed the 13th most at the rim shots last season. They were worst in the NBA in finishing. Poor offensive rebounding team. And as a result, their half-court offense was actually not that great. It was fine, but it wasn't great, despite an MVP season from Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. So it would be one thing to say that the Thunder have, eschewed centers and been awesome anyway. They've been good anyway. But their statistical profile looks like they don't have a center on their team. You look and you're like, oh yeah, figures. And so to add one who is as good as I think we expect Chet to be, and how kind of well established he's already been at the different checkpoints of his career, from Gonzaga to the Summer League to, the select team and some of the, extracurricular hype that guys tend to get. It's all headed in the right direction for him to not only be good, potentially be a great player in his own right, as a number 3 overall pick should be, but also to really make them better. And so that's what's exciting to me. His redshirt season too. I mean, this is a guy who, like Ben Simmons or some of these other Joel Embiid, some of these players who miss a year and come in, that helps. There is an adjustment to what life is like, what professionalism is like, what your teammates are like in the NBA, that he is going to have a year under his belt with that a lot of guys don't have, that shouldn't be overlooked. So I think the ideal thing with Chet is he should fill in a lot of gaps that they had last year while not hurting what their identity already is, because the thing that makes him a unicorn is he can do all those things. He can finish, he can offensive rebound, he can protect the rim, but he also should be able to play within kind of their 5-out identity. He can play a faster paced game. He can fit into what they were already great at. So I have extremely high expectations for him, even, obviously setting aside the fact that he's coming off an injury and is a super young player. But if that gets figured out and he just ingrains into the NBA well, I think he should be really, really impactful for them immediately.
Really curious what he looks like physically. I mean, not just from an injury standpoint, but if I had concerns about him coming into the league, it was a thinness thing. And he's had a year or two, even with a foot injury. I'm surely been able to add muscle and get stronger and grow into his body a little bit. I mean, do you remember when him and Paolo were like hanging out before the draft and there was like photos of them? Do you remember some of this?
I think so.
So like you can find them like looking really like Paolo looks like very cool with like chains on, and then Chet also has like a big chain, but he looks ridiculous because his body's like too thin for the chain, and he's also just like this tall, awkward looking white guy who like I feel like should be wearing like doing what I do in the fall, which is like wear flannel and like listen to sad boy music. Honestly, I mean not like to stereotype
some nice denim would be more what he should be throwing on.
Yeah, like I feel like he could wear like the rock the shit out of a sweater polo, you know?
Sure.
You know,
he's also from Minnesota, yeah, right?
Yeah,
so
it
fits.
Like, yeah. But he's like, this is someone that I expect to like have a little bit more mass on his body, and like I think him getting time, like we're not going to get to see the point of like him going from Gonzaga to this full gap year basically because of the injury. Doesn't exactly give us a great read on like what his strength would have looked like in year one, but I do think like there's something to learn in what he's going to look like. I think physically. Brendon, I did
at 195 last year. That's what's on his basketball reference page. So
that is light.
Yeah, I mean we talked about Bilal Coulibaly in the Wizards preview on Monday, and he was listed at 230.
Yeah,
that guy doesn't look big. So if you're telling me he's 35 pounds heavier than Chet, Chet has some ways to go, but I think he'll get there.
So my most important player is Shai.
Yeah,
like I understand this is the obvious one. I understand this is like. I'm doing what I'm making fun of you for picking the Heat, that I just like pick the obvious and pick the name brand. Like I was like, what's your favorite pop? I was like Coca-Cola, you know?
Yeah.
But this is someone who just, I think was one of the best was a legitimate All-NBA guy, was an engine of a really interesting offense, is someone that I think should still keep getting better. And I think we're going to learn like how much can he elevate? How much better can he get? Can he like? And all I do also just think I tend to think I want to see guys sustain it. I do want to see him do like what he did last year for a year, 2 years until it like really, really solidifies over a big sample scale. And now this team has, I think, a little bit more expectation, a little bit more hype. Does he raise his game as they raise their game? And where does that go? I mean, it's not this like this is someone that I think we'll still continue to see grow for a long time. But coming off of FIBA, at the age he's at, I think this is another prime year for him to take another level. And what that looks like is like a top 7 NBA player. Like the ceiling on this guy is that high. I don't know if he's like top 7 right now, but I think you could get there by the end of this year. And what that means for the Thunder,
MVP, right?
Right, but yeah, and like obviously that has like some different like there's like correlating that 1-to-1 is always a little bit tricky to me.
It is, but I mean at the end of the day, right? Like he had a top 5 season in an NBA season. So you're right. I mean. He's already on his way there. I mean, the thing to me that's interesting is what does he get better at? What does that actually look like? What do you think that looks like? Because I look at his statistical profile, and over the course of the past 2 seasons with Oklahoma City, after Chris Paul left, he basically was showing us he could do this. He just played 68 games this time. And when I look at the stats, I think the biggest thing I can point to that improved would be that he, 2 things. He cut his turnover rate, but only by a little. And he got to the line a shit ton more. That's the big one. His shooting fouled percentage, the number of shot attempts that he gets fouled on, went up from 14 to 20%. He was in the 100th percentile among how much he got fouled out of how many shots he took. And he really jumped in free throw percentage. So he just had an all-time historical free throw season. There's like 50 other people that the NBA employs who have a lot to say about if that continues, right? That's probably the thing I would be, in terms of continuing it, that I would be looking at. But what do you think he can do to go to another level? If we assume the free throw stuff kind of continues, what's past that?
Yeah. I think assist-wise, his assist percentage dropped a little bit last year, dropped 5%. You know, that some of that could just be guys miss shots. But I do think, can he ramp that back up into, the top 10% of assist percentages, maybe even top 5%, where he was 2 years ago in 35 games. And, I think with Chet, I think there's a possibility that he just has another outlet. And I do think defensively, I think maybe if there's more, if, Giddey takes a step forward as a creator, if Jalen Williams takes a step forward, if Chet gives them something on offense, and maybe there's just another gear defensively he can hit. I mean, I do think what he was as a rookie defensively and where he's ended up is changed just because of the role he has taken on. But he's still really big. He's 6'6". As he gets stronger, as he gets older, as he gets smarter, what does he look like as a defender? Does he become like the optimal two-way version of him that I think is really fun to fantasize about? Because it's a kind of guard that like he has a higher defensive upside to me just based on what we've seen and what we kind of understand about him. I think that's a lot higher than some of the other guards in his age range. Like I think it's higher than LaMelo, it's higher than Ja, it's higher than Darius Garland, it's higher than any of those other young guys. He's got a defensive ceiling and versatility that I believe in much more than any of those guys. But I want to see a little bit more of it this season.
Yeah, that's probably fair. I tend to think he kind of tops out as like a good team defender.
Which is that's above what some other guys are for his usage rate and his offensive role.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think that's worth saying.
So I think the first thing you said is where I would want to see too, because for Canada at the World Cup, he also played the similar style to what he played this past year for the Thunder. And until we really see it happen with somebody who's not James Harden or LeBron James, I don't fully buy that somebody with a 35% usage and a 25 to 30% assist rate is going to lead a championship team. I don't think that's what it's going to look like. And especially when you have enough other perimeter talent on this team that you already can see him needing to adjust for as soon as this year, they all love him. So when I say this, I don't mean it to be that I think that there's any reason to think it won't happen, but how does he make his teammates better? How does he, besides just being so good that he lifts them up because he can score every time or he can create a good shot every time, how does he actually make everybody around him better? Does he take more threes to allow himself to fit off ball better? Does he lower his usage a little bit? Does he buy in more on defense, or am I just completely wrong about the heliocentric nature of his game? And actually, he is just as good as James Harden, and he'll do it, and he'll make a contending team by himself. I mean, I don't know. I'm not willing to say that can't happen because he is still only 25, but that would be my question. And I think that there's so much talent on this team that it's kind of inevitable that there's going to be a balancing here.
Yeah, and I think as guys get better, I think that might come naturally. I think he seems like someone who will be amenable to some of that. Player we'll be talking about most at the end of the season. I do just go with Chet. I don't think we need to rehash anything of what you said, but for me, it's about, this is, to me, like the second most promising player and most important long-term player for this team, and I think he establishes himself, and we see him, like being in the Rookie of the Year running this year, which is going to, he is going to be eligible for that, obviously, because he didn't play his actual, what should have been his rookie year.
Who would you pick?
You're
going to
get. I think you kind of have to pick Vic, but would it surprise me if there's a world where Chet is maybe just a little bit cleaner in year one, and he and maybe he plays more games. Mm-hmm. That's the thing. It's you have to just assume that Victor Wembanyama is going to play 65 games, and
it's going to be a fun race when you include Scoot too. It's going to be a pretty fun subplot.
Yeah, I mean, if Wembanyama, this isn't a Spurs pod, we've done that already, but if Wembanyama is what he's supposed to be, then he should win this. It would be what I would say. But
yeah, for sure.
Chet, if you're talking about young, interesting bigs, he's up there with the best ones you could think of right now. It's him and Mobley and Wembanyama. It's he's in that class of guy. It's just y'all must have forgot because it's been a year since we've seen him play basketball.
Yeah, in Summer League, nearly 4 blocks per game, 61% shooting from 2. He didn't make his threes, but pretty much everything else came along like you would like. He might struggle with fouling this year, especially because he's still going to be smaller than a lot of guys, but I think he'll make a big impact, as I said. All right, my player we're going to be talking about, you know where we're going. It's Jalen Williams. It's J-Dub. After the All-Star break last year, 22 games, Jalen Williams put up 19, 5, and 4 on 55, 43, 88 shooting. At Summer League, he embarrassed the host team in the Utah Jazz. I believe that's who he played. Mm-hmm. And this dude just lives at the rim already. Nearly half of 48% of his shots last year came at the rim. made 70% of them. That's like a center. Got fouled 12% of the time. Already has a better than 2-to-1 assist-to-turnover ratio. Already in the 70th percentile as a defensive impact. In terms of his defensive impact per dunks and threes, they're estimated plus-minus. Like, I kind of almost didn't put him because we already were talking about him. Like, J.J. Redick and others kind of tried to half-heartedly make the case for him to win Rookie of the Year last year over Paolo.
Mm-hmm.
But I just think this guy, it's kind of all right there for him. And we talked about it a little bit with Chet. We've mentioned Giddey's name. What are the chances right now that, putting our guess out right now, but forecasting out into the future, let's say at Jalen Williams' peak, 5-6 years from now when all these guys are at their peaks, what are the chances Jalen Williams is the second best player on this team? Let's start there. Over Chet, over Giddey, over whatever other picks or stuff that could come in the future. I mean, we don't know that, but let's just say what's on the roster right now.
15%, 20%, somewhere in there. Because I think that highly of Chet. I kind of think I'm all in on Giddey. So I skew a little bit lower. Even if the frame, even if some of the defensive stuff, even if some of the athleticism stuff that I think maybe separates him from Giddey. Mm-hmm. And I think kind of maybe create some different lack of overlap, let's say, with Shai in the way that there could be with Giddey in some ways. The shooting, certainly. I think I would go up somewhere between 15 and 20%. But I don't think that, to me, for me personally, Brendon, that says to me, for me, more about what I feel about Chet and what I feel about Giddey than me being lower on Jalen Williams.
Yeah, I think he's going to be better than Giddey, right now, to be honest. So I think it's him or Chet. And then I think, so he's 6'6" with a 7'2" wingspan and all that statistical stuff that I already said, and he's strong as hell, right? Like, he can really impact games defensively, offensively, both, with how much force he can play with. What are the chances he's the best player on this team at his peak? Is there any? Is it better? 0?
Is Shai in another team?
No.
Then I think I'm not going to say 0% because stuff can just happen, but it's less than 5%.
So the one
Shai is that because you're saying if he surpasses Shai, that either means Shai to me has regressed or that Jalen Williams is a top 5 NBA player. And top 5 NBA player is just that's.
Well, you just gave the caveat that Shai getting the MVP stuff does not mean he's a top 5 player. I think we would say right now
top
Shai's
8
top 10 to 15, 10 probably 10 player.
I think even Jalen Williams surpassing that is
there. Okay.
That's just a very high bar.
No, it is.
He could be top. It's just a high bar.
To pour some cold water on that, he's already 22, right? So his rookie season was when he was 21. So we can get super excited about what he looked like right out of college, but he was in college longer than most guys. You would think he should probably be dominating, right? His second contract is going to be covering his entire prime, basically, rather than even Shai, for instance, who was freshly 19 when he came into the league, and that's why we're seeing his breakout basically now. He's only 2.5 years older than Jalen Williams. So that would be the case against it is, how much higher is Jalen Williams' ceiling than what he's already at, considering his age, but I think there is a really decent chance that he is the second best player on this team. I don't probably think his creation ability is going to be good enough to be the best, but that just speaks to how loaded this team is. And if Jalen Williams was just thought of as a no-brainer future All-Star by the end of this year, that would not surprise me.
I mean, they are. Just young talent overall. They are just ridiculously stacked to be in a great spot with all of these guys. They are just in an obscene position with the amount of young talent they have. It's truly, I imagine, the envy of most every team.
Presti did it
other team
again.
In the league.
Isn't that insane?
Yeah.
It's really wild.
But credit to him.
If you were to make a list and go what are the best conglomerations of great young cores in NBA history, you would probably put this iteration of the Thunder rebuilding and the first iteration of the Thunder rebuilding near the top in the modern era. Like they might be 1 and 2, and he did both. Which is crazy.
Yeah. Nuts. All right. Let's move on to the next part of our preview, Brendon, which is going to be best lineup. I think some of this does. I am curious to see how we both handle Chet in this, just because I think with him and being effective right away, I think there is some projection involved there for a team that did have successful lineups last year. Just to pull up their last season data on cleaning the glass. This is a team that obviously just like there is going to be some continuity here. The best lineup they had last season, that like there is a little bit of goofiness in some of their data if you go in and look at it a little bit. But their best lineup that played 150 possessions or more: Shai, J. Will, Dort, Giddey, Muscala at the 5. They had another one that played 153. That was Shai, J. Will, Dort, Giddey, and then Kenrich Williams was ostensibly the 5.
Yeah. Yeah, it's pretty, again, speaking to how well set up they are, it's the top, they didn't have a ton of positive lineups because they had so many injuries, but all of their best lineups had those 4 with Shai, J-Dub, Dort, and Giddey, and then it was just like, because they didn't really have a center, it's just kind of whoever the 5th guy was going to be. So that's like where I went with this.
Well, but just for context real quick, the note is, because just as a note of how chaotic last year was a little bit for them, 8,134 possessions for the Thunder. Mm-hmm. The most common lineup was 620 possessions. That's not a lot. Second most common lineup, 207 possessions. And that one didn't even have Shai in it. That was Isaiah Joe, J. Will, Dort, Giddey, and J. Will, and the other J. Will.
Weird lineup. I guess Giddey, that's kind of like the Giddey point guard lineup, right?
But that's just like, it's like Isaiah Joe is your obsessive, like guarding ones that played. That was your second most used lineup at 207 possessions. That's like, what?
So,
like that. Yeah.
Well, and it's also funny to just look at the positions that cleaning the glass like attributes to everybody, because it just speaks to how interchangeable they were and how small they played. It's like Giddey is the 4 in as far as this site shows, and then J-Dub was the 2. It's a little funny, but I'll do my best lineup. All right. Best lineup for the 2024 Oklahoma City Thunder is very similar to what they had last year. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander at the 1, MVP candidate. He will be likely even better in year 5. Josh Giddey is a make everybody better type. He leveled up in Australia, and I expect his scoring and playmaking to be yet another level higher here in year 3. I think Jalen Williams, J-Dub, has to be in this lineup. I'm expecting a massive breakout for him. I think he is one of the best young players in the entire league, lives at the rim, impacts the game defensively, is only going to get better. I do have Lou Dort in this lineup. His shot is probably never going to be reliable, but he's one of the best on-ball defenders in the NBA, athletic, physical, makes everybody's life a little bit easier on both ends because of the chaos factor, and then Chet Holmgren has to be in here. Still one of the only real centers on this team, and is going to plug a lot of holes at the rim, in the paint, around the basket for a team that sorely needs that. Did you have the same thing as me?
Tell me your 5 back to me real quick. I just want
Shai,
to hear it one more
Giddey,
time.
J-Dub, Dort, Chet.
Yeah, that's the 5. That has to be
pretty easy. It's the same 4 who were in all their best lineups, and then the best center that they're getting, who was number 2 pick or number 3 pick.
So, like, as much as we are optimistic about them, I think it's worth noting that, like, there is still some questions about what the overall depth on the roster becomes. Like, I really like Dort, but you do mention the shot volatility with him. I think that's a real concern. Like, Isaiah Joe is a guy that I think is going to give you good value as a shooter and is, like, a really cheap option. But, there's some limits in his game. Are you going to get anything out of Ousmane Dieng? Are you going to get anything out of Big Jalen Williams this year in a different way that kind of maybe elevates him? I really like Kenrich Williams, but it can be hard to find minutes for him and space for him at times just because there are some limitations in what he does.
Well, especially because him and J. Will are so similar, right? Like, you saw Jalen Williams step up once Kenrich got hurt.
Yeah. And he's 28, and it's like at a certain
play.
point, like, is that someone on a cheap contract? Could you get more? Not that you need more picks, but like, could you flip him just to clear more waste? This is a team that I think is still searching for some of these other fringe young guys, whereas they've nailed the upper echelon stuff, which is definitely more important. But like, Ousmane Dieng hasn't hit. Poku has not hit. Like, Darius Baisley hasn't hit. Like, they have not found that next kind of mid-tier kind of deep role guy that just kind of clicks fully, that you trust fully, that isn't super similar to these other guys yet. I think that
Darius
there's a weakness
Bazley
in this roster. It's
appreciates
that.
your reference there. He's out of the league. Brother's gone.
I know.
No,
But, like,
your point is, well,
like,
they drafted him and
yeah.
it didn't turn out. He fits on the list you were saying, but it's just like he wasn't expecting to hear his name on this one. Who's the next 5 for them then? Just since we're on the topic, outside of that 5 we just said, who are the other 5 guys who play the most minutes over the course of the season? I think we haven't talked about Micic. I think he's probably going to play because they signed him from Europe.
Yeah.
Right? I think Kenrich is better than J. Will, so I would probably say, if he doesn't get traded, it's him. I believe in Isaiah Joe, so that's 8.
I do too. I really like Isaiah Joe. He's on like a bargain contract. I mean, is Trey Mann like there? I mean, he played
Yeah.
like
Trey
65
Mann,
games.
Aaron Wiggins, they both played a lot last year.
Wiggins. So I was looking at their games played. Giddey 76, Jalen Williams the really good one 75, Dort 74, Isaiah Joe 71, Aaron Wiggins 69, Shai 68, Trey Mann 65.
Yeah. And Mann had a good summer league.
Dieng would be an option if like he could actually like prove himself. That would be like the fun one. Yeah. I'm kind of out on Poku as a thing. I'm sorry, like but Dieng would be one that if that could kind of come together from at age 20 when he played 38 games last year in the NBA, and
he just doesn't play like he's 20. He plays like he's like 18. It's kind of, he just still feels so raw, but it should, you're right, it should start to come along. But yeah, and then Kassan Wallace they have, who they drafted. I think he could easily play minutes, and he seems like a pretty plug and play type of guy, but they have so many guards and creators already. You're not really sure if it's going to be him. Yeah, I don't know. It's going to be interesting, but I think those 8 we said are probably not locks, but that's probably their top 8.
There is like a maybe a need for like you consolidate like 2 of these guys, like young guys that you're like kind of on to like get a slightly older veteran that fits better. I don't know who that guy is, but I could see like a world where you do that just to kind of give a little more structure to your rotation. Even if part of what I think Presti has done with this group is really just like kind of build it so you are kind of in the vein of like not like a development situation fully as like some of these soccer teams are in Europe, where it's like their whole thing is like we develop guys and give guys a chance to platform themselves and go somewhere else. I don't think that's what's happening here, but I do think his idea is like, let's get as many guys in as we can, and competition wins out to some degree.
Yeah, and I wouldn't expect all these guys to be on the roster. By the start
with
of
all the
camp
picks
next year, right?
I mean, with all the picks they have, they literally can't be. Like they can't.
Have the Rockets
like
pick this year too. That's kind of one of the big ones. They have Houston's pick, and I think we both picked the over for Houston, or we even their over under number is already obviously higher than they were last year. But I don't think it would be crazy if they're in the lottery. So that's already one. Yeah, we'll see. But yeah, what they are this year and whether it's fully developmental is probably a good segue to the best and worst case. I had best case, everyone gets better. The sum is greater than the parts, and the Thunder are a top 4 seed ahead of schedule.
Yeah, I think best case for me is top 6 seed. I think the West is still really good. I think top 4 is like just a little. I'm gonna extend those parameters a little bit, but I think I think if you want to look at what is the best case of how you get there, it's Shai drives it again. Chet hits the ground running, maybe wins Rookie of the Year, or is at least like a close number 2 to Wembanyama, and Jalen Williams takes another step forward, and you feel like those 3 guys are your core. And like I think you're right to be higher in him than Giddey, but maybe there's also a role for Giddey there as well, or just something happens there, because the Giddey passing stuff can just be so fun. But I think top 6 seed and maybe win a playoff round. I mean, if you could get to round 2 for this group this year, would be like, that's one of those things where it's like, even if you don't win the title and any of that, I think it could be really impactful for them to kind of go through some of that.
I mean, that's basically the track record with the Durant teams, right? They almost made the playoffs one year. Then all of a sudden they're pushing the Kobe Lakers in the first round, right? And then all of a sudden, holy shit, they're in the finals, right? Like, it does happen fast if you have enough young talent that all is getting better and playing together enough. Like, that jump can surprise people. Worst case, I had the front office and coaching staff slow roll everything to see what they have, and it's another play-in season.
Same thing. I think if this team should... I understand to some degree to slow roll stuff. I understand to some degree being patient. I don't think you should force things. But I think when you have someone as good as Shai, I think perpetually holding the group back for the sake of long-term building, I think it does some of these guys a disservice. I think it does the organization a disservice. And I think at some point you kind of just got to go for it. You have the picks to get around not like being optimized with your own draft pick. You have the assets to go do some stuff if you want to and get around some of that. So to me, I think there's no real reason to hold back.
You might already have a core that's good enough to win a championship. You may not even need to ever make the big move.
Or like if you use the assets to make a big move, it's to like overpay for the perfect fitting role guy, which is a luxury other teams do not have.
Yeah, you do the Godfather offer for Mikal Bridges that the Grizzlies allegedly wanted to do, right? Or you kind of you have the luxury of picking exactly the right guy. Yeah, I think that's a good way to say it. Did you see that Mannix said that they promised Shai they wouldn't bench him or rest him last year? That was kind of an interesting nugget because he did that big Shai Thunder profile preseason last year, and I guess he said he didn't really report it because it was never like they had a contract signed with the guy, but he was like, yeah, it was understood that wasn't going to be an option this year, and I think that's badass. That Shai was like, nah. And then he went out and proved it. He's like, look, we're going to win 40-plus games as long as you don't sit me, and then sure enough.
Yeah. This brings us to our last thing, the over-under, which is at a very spicy number, Brendon, 44.5.
Mm-hmm. It's tough.
I think this is the one I have struggled with the most in my initial instincts on this. For reference of last season, if you go to their record, they were 10th at 40 and 42. So you're saying you get Chet, better health. Can you add 4.5 wins, albeit in a Western Conference that above them has not changed all that much? Brendon, I'm taking the over. I'm going to be bold. I think it's going to be like 45.
Okay.
Like somewhere in there, or like it's going to just be slight, but I'm going to be an optimist about them. I think they can peel wins from the Wolves, the Pelicans. The Clippers season goes sideways. I think Portland won 33 games last year. They're probably just going to like drop 15 of those, something obscene, right? Mm-hmm. I think this is the team that could really capitalize on that and rack up wins. But would I be surprised if they win like 43 or like get to 44 and don't actually cross 44.5, but still have 44, which is what the Warriors won last year in the regular season? I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah, it's right on the cusp. I completely agree. They were statistically a 43-win team last year, so they got a little bit unlucky. They weren't great in the clutch, which is actually kind of a surprise when you think about what we think of Shai being able to do in those moments. They actually were ninth from the bottom in terms of clutch net rating with a minus 6.1 per 100 possessions in the clutch. So I just think they have too many positive players to be bad. I think as long as they're relatively healthy, I think even their young guys are good now. Even their young guys are players you would expect to drive winning. So get a little better in the half court offensively, ideally. Get even better defensively. If everybody young player wise contributes like we think, you're asking for 2 more wins than what they were statistically last year. I know the real win total matters, but even 5 I think is possible. I probably would not bet this one though, because again, I do think what the organization wants, like it's one thing to not sit Shai, but it's like, how do they bring Chet along? Do they really?
I mean, Chet might not play back-to-backs. He might not play back-to-backs. He might play 60 games this year. It's very possible he's not even eligible to win Rookie of the Year.
Yeah. So that kind of all cumulatively, I'm like, they might not want to be the 6th seed. They might not want to drive themselves into the ground just to win 3 more games if they could just be the 7, 8, 9 seed and test their luck that way. They're going to be good enough to be in that mix either way, though.